Welcome back. This is UEFN Performance, video number 2 from GameDevMicah. The first video I spoke a little bit about the general setup of what I'm looking to do, how less is best, and how data is passed around inside your computer, whatever device that is, your phone, your Switch Lite, or your desktop computer. The whole idea there is there's a CPU, a GPU, storage, and network. They're all connected with buses that can only pass so much data per second. The less data, the less detailed your environments are, the more simplistic your meshes are, the more simplistic your levels are, and unified into streamlined systems, the faster their frame rates will be across all platforms, and the smoother that experience, the more enjoyable that experience will be for your clients or your customers. Sorry about the microphone cutting out in the last video. Hopefully I've turned that gain issue off and you will be able to hear me just fine through this one. What we're going to do is walk through my optimization notes from my last 3 to 4 months of optimizing UEFN projects. I've been doing about half and half UEFN versus UE5 projects. The UEFN projects, I've gotten to deal with some wonderful studios and creators. They're some of the top ones out there. Thank you so much for your patronage. It's funded this document, and it's funded the time I've spent into looking into this environment. Fortnite, I'm going to just read through the document. And then I look for you to please comment below any challenges you have or questions you have on what's done. I don't work for Epic. This is my individual findings from doing my consultation and proofing this out on my Switch Lite that I bought off eBay for 99 bucks, my 4060 and my dev PC, as to making sure that things like instant static meshes are supported across both those platforms, that GPU, Niagara systems are supported, and what type of rendering we can get to with using the HLOD systems for ISMs or instancing and also merged meshes. We'll talk about how that all impacts, but in general, the overall motto is less is best. So let's go ahead and start reading through here. This is probably going to be 2 hours. I'm going to try to cut these up into smaller videos and do a series. We have one video out. This will be the second video. Maybe keep them around 20 minutes to a half an hour, if I can keep a look over at the recording screen to make sure. So let's start reading through this. And please reach out to me on Twitter as GameDevMicah, LinkedIn as Micah Berninghausen, and you can add me on Discord as GameDevMicah as well. I do hourly consultation if you'd like for me to walk through any of these details with you on your island or work on your UE5 projects. Let me know. Let's chat. Let's figure it out. I've been having a lot of fun helping a lot of people. Everyone that I have helped, word of mouth is the best way for me to continue to do this. Hopefully, just as we review this document, I can get some better word of mouth from other viewers as well here for free. But for those that I've consulted with, thank you so much. You've made this possible and helping me to continue to make my video games, which are about destruction. One called Speed Up, which I'm pushing to put out as soon as possible. So give me a follow and check out that stuff too. All right, let's walk through this document. Fortnite optimization, running notes. These are from my meetings. The goal of this document is to be used as a review chart of your current implementation in your islands and or discussion points for optimizations going forward. The goal is to accelerate our optimizations so that our online time spent in calls is on ever more difficult and challenging problems instead of perhaps whatever I've learned or whatever I've detailed out in this document. It's something that you could work on or at least be aware of before we talk to help accelerate the value of those future conversations or the hours spent together. Preface NDA. It's odd to have an NDA when I'm putting this up on YouTube, right? Really what I'm trying to do there is say the time we spend together is a work in progress. I ask that you challenge and point out where you would like clarity and examples throughout this process. UEFN is a fast and moving environment, and its development is labeled as experimental by Epic Games. This document represents a point in time and is an attempt at a living document that changes over that time to follow the experimental development as closely as possible. Things may be wrong, especially depending on how far in the future you view this. I require that this document and presentation data remain private and confidential. When we continue development, with the continued development of UEFN and the exposure of this non-living, non-running document puts me at risk. I have no control over a document released, so please don't consider this epic documentation. This is not in any way supported by Epic Games. It's only my personal findings during performance consultation with some of the top island creators and studios, and will change over time. Scene Graph offers major improvements on what we're specifically talking about in this document, and should be studied as soon as it's publishable on your islands, which it's currently not in the current state. We're doing this on UEFN version 31.20 in UE 5.5. The data and learnings exchanged between us, you're welcome to transpose and share as your own understanding and knowledge publicly. The hard documents and any recorded videos or audio I provide shall remain confidential and private. Please don't recut this and present it as this information as facts. It's just, I'm trying. It's just me working here, and I'm trying this out. Thank you. And also, you have knowledge. So I have 3 months of UEFN knowledge here. A lot of you have been working in UEFN a lot longer than I have. You have knowledge you can provide. Please comment it below. Let's make this better. Thank you. The motto is most important here. Less is best. In the first video, we talked about busways and how computers work and how passing that data around takes time. The less amount of data, the less time, the better frame rate, the better experience. So that's what we're going to mainly focus on here, is what we can cheapen up in your environment, lighten up, versus and doing that. It's going to be a little bit outside of devices. Devices would be that next phase on how do we do devices efficiently, such as pooling. This is mainly focused on your level creation for static and pieces of your level. Pieces that you're not going to be able to destroy with a hatchet, or that you're not going to want to damage or move. Things like the ground, things like mountains in the background, your static environment. If it's a non-building or a non-destructible environment, like a warm-up type of a level that people have been playing, this is what this is for, to get that framework in your warm-up level that's just there for people to basically collide with as cheap as possible. And then we'll work on the individual devices and building and all the other stuff in the future, because that stuff's a lot more dynamic and a lot less things we can tune at this point. Or at least what I looked at less. This is about 70 pages. A lot of that's pictures, but we're going to still walk through it pretty slowly. Let's see, 7 minutes. Let's walk through. So project settings. I started a blank level, and we're just going to talk about what type of optimization and performance considerations can be seen there on the base project settings, or go through all the settings in general. So this is going to be maybe a little bit more than just optimizations, but rather sort of an editor review as well. So you have your project settings you can get through from the drop down and open up, and this is going to have things in it that are not where you would be enabling this future scene graph system is right here. So I kind of pointed that out. And then general details. There's not a lot to do in the project settings, but when we need to use the scene graph, which will let us make very light pieces of our environment, it will enable it here. That's a future piece. Engine scalability. Engine scalability is something that we can change in the editor, but the customer typically can change on their device as well. So when you're adjusting your anti-aliasing or your shadows, global illuminations, or things in here to make your editor run faster, the client might not be doing the exact same things on their settings. So beware that there are ways to say, oh man, I'm getting a little flooded here with UE5 versus UEFN, but that these scalability groups and these engine scalability settings are not forced on your clients. But they will help your editor run quicker, which can help you develop your game faster. And so that's like polish versus development. I run a lot of these settings on low just so I can fastly run around in my 4060. But then if you have customers that are using high-end settings like full lumen, things are going to look different, perform different for their environment. So you play around with these settings on hardware to try and figure out what your benchmarking is going to look like. Preview platforms, this is starting to try and show you what it will run like on your customer's hardware and what type of shaders will be supported on your customer's hardware. But again, it doesn't have all devices down here, and it doesn't do a match one-to-one. Some videos out there on optimization will say, hey, if you're running on performance mode, that's going to be like what some people would use on their light-end devices where they turn off shadows and stuff like that. So you can kind of see what it looks like in the lightest area. but it's not a one-to-one. You're never going to be exactly like the device is unless you get the device and do its configurations and see what runs on it. And that's why I have this Switch Lite, is that a Switch Lite's a pretty inexpensive device, so a lot of people on the low end could have it. And so it should have, performance equal on your island to what your low end players would be expecting. So that's why getting, and it's $99. An old iPhone, if you're in an iPhone enabled area, is pretty cheap. Same for an old Android phone. I do recommend getting the device that you have most complaints about if you have a large customer base, and playing your island on it and seeing what you can do using these things to improve it. That is the end of the day. Validation or certification is on actual hardware. I did go and run on PC Direct 3D Mobile to see if Niagara GPU and HISMs will render, and they look like they are. Now, once again, it's not a direct one-to-one that all mobile devices on low end are going to work this way, or Vulkan, all that other stuff, but this is how you can this is how I validated that things worked, is by checking the different editor pieces and then running it on hardware too, and seeing that GPU Niagara and ISMs and HISMs render across all those areas. We did run into some issues with Niagara effects types, and you can create a new Niagara effect type and assign it to, and I think I did that in UE5 and brought it over, but I think there may be a way to do it in UEFN, so we'll look into that somewhere in this video. Editor settings. We're at 11 minutes, so we'll go through like 3 or 4 pages, cut it at 20 minutes, do another video going through another set of pages so that we can keep these in that kind of a frame rate. So with your editor settings, let's see what's in here. You have a local cache on disk option here. Let's see, make this any bigger. That is going, a lot of the settings you find in Unreal, if not all of them, you can hover over and get extra details on, so do that. And also you could look into if they have options or links to the documentation, go look at the documentation. So the local cache size on disks, this may need to be increased if you have a lot of custom assets or you're using a lot of things. This is basically them trying to limit your local cache so that your editor runs well. It'd be neat to see if somebody ran into this. I haven't had anyone really asked about it, but just in going through each options, so that's a detail. What I do like here is client, in your editor preference, the client game resolution. When you're launching that window, I work on a 4K screen. It was always launching at 1080p. This would be where you can go ahead and have it launch at 4K rather than trying to resize it. So that's what that is. So some options there. Quality of life choices for key bindings are options there for shortcuts. Anything you can do often, if you can get it typically into a shortcut, you'll be able to do it a lot quicker versus hunting down things. I was super excited to find out that F2 will let you rename anything, rather than trying to click on it twice to get it to pop up or right click into a menu. Just hit F2 when you have it selected. That's a fast one. Auto saving, those are your auto save settings, so how frequently that pops up for you to save stuff. One thing I do recommend is disabling real-time rendering in the viewport if you're on a laptop or something, or even on your desktop. It will make your screen stop updating every frame unless you're moving it around. Things like particles and material movement or updates won't show, but it will cut your power draw like in half because your GPU won't be really running most of the time. So that's a really important thing for laptops, is to disable your real port rendering by just unclicking that there if you want to save your battery. So we continue down here, show frame rate and memory in the editor performance. This is a way for you to get a frame rate or some detail back on how the editor is running. The editor is always going to run a bit slower than a packaged game, but it will give you some idea of what the packaged game impact versus things are. So like if you have a whole bunch of Niagara systems on screen, the editor will run a little bit slower. So will the game. The game will run a little bit slower too. But a fully packaged game will be faster than the editor is. But it's good to look at and watch how the editor is doing as a way to kind of like get a feel for it. Editor FPS, okay. Now, less CPU in the background. This one's a little bit spicy. Just like turning off real-time rendering will help save battery, putting less CPU in the background means that if you alt tab out or go do something else, that Fortnite won't take as much power. The editor won't take as much power. So it will save your battery life. Where it hurts you is if you're doing anything. So if you're generating HLODs and you alt tab out, the editor will run a little bit slower to generate those HLODs, like a lot slower. So it will take a lot longer. If you have construction scripts or something, anything going on that's doing work, and you're like, all right, I'm going to let the editor do this while I go watch YouTube. If you have it running slower, or if you have use less CPU in the background, the minute you go watch YouTube, it's going to take like way longer to actually do whatever you're doing. So you may want to leave that enabled if you're plugged into power, or rather, you may want to use less CPS in the background disabled when you're plugged in to power, so that you can get all the compute done fast if you ever alt tab out. VSync, editor VSync, it's VSync. It's locking frame. It's trying to get rid of tears from rendering if you're producing not enough frames to match the rendering piece. So you can turn on VSync for the editor. World partition. We have show HLODs in editor, show HLODs over loaded regions. So this is where you can see the HLODs in the editor without, because otherwise the editor won't show you HLODs, because they are basically, it wants to show you all the stuff you're working on or the level. So you can modify the stuff rather than what gets instanced and viewed at range. So this will kind of is where you can draw some of that detail in the editor, and also do your min and max HLOD draw distances. So the HLOD draw distances, that might be good to limit on the far side. It won't affect your package size, but it would help increase your frame rate by culling things sooner. So that would be one way you could do that maximum distance issue. I haven't played with it a whole bunch. Maybe we should play with that a bit more, but that would be where we could get that max draw distance for HLODs. Binding controls are down here for the different viewports. So quality of life thing, how you move around the windows. And there's some privacy options that you should consider. And they have some interesting effects. So if you turn off your usage data, it won't report when you're using the editor. You won't get hours of how much you played or worked in Fortnite shown. But, and that means you may not be able to, say, work on Fortnite Lego Islands, because you need like 12 days of play time recently to be certified for that. So if you don't want yourself to be tracked by Papa Epic, you want to turn these off, but it may also prevent you from being able to work on different islands if you haven't certified or gotten enabled for it yet. So some options on privacy to think about. 17 minutes. Let's get one more page here. Okay. World settings. So when you click on the world's your level. When you go over to world settings in your level, you have the option to enable streaming. Now, streaming is the use of that HLOD system to combine meshes at a distance into a more efficient and less actor-heavy way of rendering. It also enables the ability for actors to be streamed. So without enabling streaming, you won't be able to have actors actually be unloaded and loaded into the level. You can only have the rendering for them be cold in the level, but the actor would remain. Now, when the actor remains in your level, it means that it will in fact impact your memory thermometer sizing. When you stream out an actor, it reduces the memory thermometer. So that's one of the advantages to using streaming and enabling spatial loading on your actors, is that they can load in and out of your level and reduce down that memory impact. Your package size will stay the same with streaming on or off, except for that if you build HLODs, your package size will be increased when they're merged mesh HLODs, because that's new meshes, new textures that are being added in. There's a day of disable all time of day managers. So this one's kind of interesting. If you want to run your own lighting, which I do, you can get rid of the time of day manager and put in your own directional light, your own sky to simplify it rather than using the atmospheres. You can also put in a lighting rig that can control all that. But but I'm not sure if you have to disable the manager to use that rig or how those two things play together. I know if you disable all daylight managers, you get rid of all the lighting in the scene, and then if you put a directional light in or any of your own stuff, you have full control of it. So that's where you could get full control of your lighting. The cheaper stuff you put in the lighting, like getting rid of fog, getting rid of sky atmospheres, getting a lot of clouds, that's all complex rendering and data. When you get rid of that stuff, your game's going to run faster. If you're doing a warm-up mode or a low-end device targeted level, it might be a good idea to get rid of the data light manager and just use one directional light and a blue sphere for a sky and call it good. Maybe pull in some Fortnite clouds, non-collision clouds, to have them up in the sky, and just put in a fake sun and make it very simple. Tools. The project size tool, view a breakdown of your project size, and you can do it by type and package. This is something you should be living in a lot when you're looking at your window in there, and there's a lot of documentation out there specifically on how these different breakdowns of your resource view of what's involved in your project can be seen. So the project side window shows how much of each piece of content or asset adds to your package. Reviewing this tool helps to locate assets to reduce, replace, or optimize within with UEFN props or custom optimized assets or static meshes you import. Don't be afraid to bring in your own assets. They are most likely going to help your game run faster frame rate wise. And if you're using a merged mesh, when you bring in a custom asset, you can actually use instance meshes for that HLOD. So you may be able to take the space you're spending right now with HLODs that are merged in Fortnite assets and use that space for your own custom assets that will render faster in ISMs because you can instance them, and also give your environment your custom taste or flavor instead of repeating use from other islands. So it might make it more unique. UEFN projects are limited to 2 gigs of uploads. That would be all your custom assets that you're putting in there, your island itself, those merged meshes and textures if you're using merged mesh HLODs, that entire thing being pushed up into the cloud. What happens when that gets packaged, that 2 gigs is pushed into the cloud, is then the cloud's going to compile it into a downloadable package that will modify your player's environment to be your island. That modified compressed package has to fit within 400 megs for release. So that's pretty cool that you can send 2 gigs up, they'll crunch it, and most likely will hit to 4 gigs down. And that's all because of those busways that we talked about in the prior video and how systems work, and limiting to try to get somewhat of a maintainable experience on the lowest end hardware. Sorting by package types, there's 2 options. By package, seems to carry better detail about individual assets versus just saying level. And this is a way to find heavy assets, things like textures that are, megs when they could be reduced from, say, 2K to 10 to 1000 by 1000, or maybe 512 by 512, powers of 2. Reduction of textures will make your materials lighter and make your package smaller. Reduction of meshes, vertice counts, will make those meshes lighter and make your package smaller. And these will all improve frame rates across the board. All right, so we'll go ahead and move into page 6 on the next video, and thanks for hanging out.